Going live in 1 minute. We're live.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the April 16, 2020 school board meeting for the Columbia Borough School District. The public, anyone in the public that is viewing the board meeting via YouTube and would like to make public comment, all you need to do is type your name, address, and comment in the chat section on YouTube. And please remember that the public comment is not a time to ask questions. Thank you. We appreciate that. And now we will have the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, for one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Sandy Duncan. Devin Fisher.
Here.
Kathy Honottle.
Here.
Kate Kaiser.
Here.
Cole Knighton.
Here.
Robert Mashanya.
Here.
Lauren Von Stetten.
Here.
Rebecca Young.
Here.
Charles Leader.
Yes.
Did I hear Sandy come on?
Yes, Sandy did come on. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. We got them all?
Yes.
All right, we do have some announcements that I need to read to everybody and make sure everybody's aware of this. Due to the governor's current stay-at-home order, the Columbia Borough School District is holding monthly committee and board meetings virtually. Community members can view the meetings virtually via a live YouTube feed by going to the district's website under departments and then going to school board. On Tuesday, March 31, 2020, the Board of School Directors and Administration met via a GoToMeeting for the sole purpose of a test meeting and training. The purpose was to test technology and no discussion of agency business occurred. At the April 2020 committee meetings, the school district solicitor, Keith, can you move that up? I can't read this on my screen. Thank you. Shared that the Office of Open Records, which is in the Pennsylvania agency that oversees the Sunshine Act, has made a specific determination that the Sunshine Act, when there is an official emergency declaration, that public agencies such as school board meetings can occur via a teleconference, a webinar, or other electronic method that allows for two-way communication among the board and to allow the public to participate. So please visit the live YouTube recording of the district's website meeting April 2nd, 20, the committee meetings. And again, you'll have to pull it up, Keith. I'm having some blockage here. For the details on the solicitor's comments and the amendments to the board policy 003 and 006.1. As we go down the agenda, we have notice of executive sessions, which we did not have any. Communications, I didn't receive any, so therefore I believe we didn't have any. Agenda modification approval, we're okay there. And public comment on agenda items, I don't know if any came in.
I have not received any in the chat for public comment, so at this time, no public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Then I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the March 19th, 2020 school board meeting, the April 2nd, 2020 extracurricular and curriculum.
I so move. Ms. Kathy Hunnoddle.
I second that. Lauren Bonstetten.
I have a motion by Kathy Honoddle and a second by Lauren Bonstetten. We will do a roll call vote on these since this is being recorded. So if we can do a roll call vote on that, Mr. Ramsey, that'd be fine.
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. We will now be going down the agenda to item number 10, which is curriculum and instruction. And that chairperson will be Mrs. Fisher, and I will turn that over to her. Mrs. Fisher.
Okay, at this time, we're looking for a motion to approve the 3-year special education comprehensive education plan effective July 1st, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I don't know who is first.
Kate Kaiser will second Kathy's motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we are also seeking a motion to approve the dual enrollment agreement with Pennsylvania College of Health Sciences. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second. Lauren Bonstetten.
I don't know. who
Cole
made the-
Knighton. Cole Knighton made the motion.
Okay, is there any discussion on this motion?
We just have a question for Mr. Strickler. Were there any updates from the solicitor?
The most recent, because we filled out a couple of lines that was not in the original, and that was all that the solicitor recommended, and he is good to go.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? Okay, can we do a roll call
Yes.
vote, please? Oh, there is,
Sorry about that. Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
yes.
Miss Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, if that concludes curriculum and instruction, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. And we would now be moving down to number 11 on the agenda, which would be a finance committee. And I would turn to Ms. Honoddle for that information. Ms. Honoddle.
First item under finance would be a motion to approve the attached financial reports. At this time, do I have a motion to approve those reports?
So moved, Kate Kaiser.
Second, Robert Mashanya.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kaiser, a second by Mr. Mishania. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel, Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Also attached to your agenda are the check disbursements for March 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those checks?
So moved. Lauren Bonstetten.
Seconded, Sandra Duncan.
I have a motion by Mrs. Von Stetten, a second by Mrs. Duncan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Do I have a motion to approve the attached budget transfers?
So moved. Kate Kaiser.
Second. Lauren Bonstetten.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kaiser, a second by Mrs. Von Stetten. Is there discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
One is looking for a motion to designate, to approve a designation of agent resolution. It's a form that will give Keith Ramsey the authority to execute documents in order to apply for COVID-19 disaster relief funds. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sandra Duncan.
Second. Rebecca Young.
I have a motion by Mrs. Duncan and a second by Mrs. Young. Is there discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're also seeking a motion to approve a joint petition to stay the 2020 upset judicial tax sales. It has to do with the current pandemic and with the economic distress, with delaying that for 1 year so that it would be a double sale in 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Lauren Bonstetten.
Second, Devin Fisher.
I have a motion by Mrs. Von Stetten, a second by Mrs. Fisher. Is there discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That concludes finance and audit.
Thank you, Ms. Honoto. Moving down on the agenda to item number 12, which will be personnel, and we return to Mrs. Duncan for that information. Mrs. Duncan.
Thank you. Under personnel, item number 1, we have retirement of professional staff. I need a motion to approve the retirement of Thomas R. DeLallo, the Industrial Arts Technology teacher at Columbia Borough Middle High School. And the retirement of his position will be effective with the last teacher day in the 2019-2020 school year. The anticipated last teacher day on or about June the 2nd, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
I didn't hear who made the motion.
Kathy Honoto.
Thank you. In a second.
Second, Lauren Von Stetten.
So we have it's been properly motioned and seconded that professional staff, industrial arts teacher retire. Those who are in favor of the motion, we need a roll call vote.
Ms. Hohenauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Under item number 2, resignations, we have the athletic extracurricular staff resignation of Michelle Resch, the band front director at Columbia Borough High Middle School campus, resigning her position effective February the 21st, 2020. Do I have a motion to accept that resignation?
So moved, Lauren Von Stetten.
Second, Kate Kaiser.
It's been properly motioned and seconded that the resignation be approved. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenauer,
Yes.
Mr. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Under item number 3, employment, under professional staff, we're having Morgan S. Black, our school psychologist at Park Elementary and Columbia Borough Middle School, Taylor campus, beginning on or about August 15th, 2020. May I have a motion to accept that professional staff? Moved in seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Hohenauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Leave of absence. Professional staff have Heather Green, the elementary teacher at Park Elementary School, leave of absence request on or about May 1st, 2020, and in the Family Medical Leave Act, weeks leave absent for approximately 12 weeks. The request for one full semester for the 2020-2021 school year to begin on or about August 14th, 2020. May I have a motion?
So moved. Lauren Von Stetten.
Lauren Johnson. And a second?
Second, Kate
Second.
Kaiser.
Rebecca Young.
It's been properly motioned and seconded. Is there any questions or discussion? If none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mashanya,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Under item number 4, leave of absences, under professional staff, I have Heather Green of the elementary, she's the elementary teacher at Park Elementary School, a leave of absence, oh, I already did that. We're going to item 5, volunteers, excuse me. Under support services, I have just Marjorie Dreggy for Columbia Borough High Middle School campus under athletics area. And then Josh Elliott Jr. for Columbia Borough High School Middle School campus under athletics. We don't need any motion or approval by the board for support services.
Sandy,
We want to thank them for supporting.
I have a question. Do we know, athletics is very general. Are they going to be in any specific program? Do we know that?
Specific.
Like, is it football, basketball, wrestling, or what are they going to do?
I think it was spring sports.
Okay.
Mr. Leader, I can check if you want the specifics, but I think it was spring sports. And because Mrs. Proke asked if we should put it up, because they did put it in, I
Good.
think the board should still see it and we approve them. Potentially, we could get them for other sports, but I think they were. I will double check that and email the whole board tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for explaining that. Any other discussion? If none under personnel, there'll be no more. I'll return to the president.
Thank you, Mrs. Duncan. We are going down the list on the agenda, and we would be at property committee, and I would turn that over to Mrs. Kaiser. Mrs. Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We're seeking a motion to extend the deadline to April 30th, 2020 for execution of the agreement between the district and the Borough of Columbia for the use of the DAC facilities in accordance with the motion approved by the board at the April 2nd, 2020 public meeting.
Kathy Hohenadel, I so move.
Lauren Von Stetten, second.
Kathy and Lauren Von Stetten second. Do I have, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And then I just have two information items. One, Fresh Express is using the Columbia High School driveway and parking lot on April 24th, 2020. And the Columbia Fire Department will be using the west lot at the high school Saturday, April 25th for testing. So just making everyone aware and to please steer clear of that area. And that is all I have for property.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. Going down the list, we are at number 14 on the agenda, and that would be Mrs. Fonstead, extracurricular.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. There are no items on the agenda for extracurricular this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Von Stetten. That makes that very easy. Now we are number 15 on the list for old business, and that deals with policy. So Robert, I would turn that to you if you just want to make a comment on that. I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I'd just like to notify the public that this meeting does serve as the second reading for the board policies in section 100. That's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. We're now down to item number 16 on our agenda, which is new business. And under new business, I would be seeking a motion to appoint Rebecca Young to the Lancaster-Lebanon IU13 board effective July 1st, 2020 as the district board representative. I would need a motion to do that.
So
So
moved.
moved, Sandra
Anya.
Duncan. Second, Sandra Duncan?
Sandra Duncan, second. Robert Masagna made the motion. So we have a motion by Robert Masagna and a second by Sandra Duncan. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Mishania,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Knighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Von Stetten,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Motion
Thank
passed.
you. Rebecca, you are now the official representative for the district. Okay, so you're in. All right, moving down to number 17 on the agenda, we return as over to Mr. Strickler for superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I apologize at the beginning for being lengthy this evening, but there's a lot of things to keep the board informed on. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to at least try to answer. For the board's information, we talked about it afterwards, and then we reached out. Effective immediately, all of the board and committee meeting agendas will now be posted on the agenda manager. What we have been doing is the agenda manager was just being used for the board meetings, and then the committee meetings we were sort of doing by paper, which means that any of the attachments the public can't see. So you could see them, but the public couldn't. So we will be going back by mid next week. The April committee meetings will be posted on the agenda manager with the attachments. And then all future meetings of the board, committee, any committee of the whole, as well as board meetings will be posted on the agenda manager so that everybody can see it. And also you'll have sort of a reference. If you lose your piece of paper, you can go back and find it online. Beginning next week, the district will comply with the Secretary of Health and Governor Wolf's order that anyone entering the district building must be wearing a mask. We will have signs posted, but we will no employee will be allowed in a district building without wearing a mask. If they're in their office, of course, they may take them off, but the governor has ordered that. So by HR policies, we must follow it. Our continuity of education plans are posted on our website and have been submitted to PDE as required, tomorrow being the deadline. As you know, enrichment and review began on March 30th. Planned instruction began on Monday, April 13th. Since we have talked last, as you know, last week, the governor has announced that schools will be closed through the end of the school year, which at this point is June 2nd. However, we are reviewing the calendar with the association, as well as counting the days and also waiting for the Department of Education to make decisions, possible potential waivers. As our hope at this point is to review the final calendar for 1920 with the board at your first committee of the whole meeting, which is a committee of the whole meeting on the first Thursday in May. This week, the district received national recognition for our at-home learning or learn at home web pages for the amount of information on them. Dr. McGuff participated in a nationally recognized webinar with, I think there was 4 other leaders from cyber schools as well as public education that participated. We were recognized as the only public school in the country that had the amount of materials for online learning so quickly after bricks and mortar schools closed. For your information, the district has reached out and we want to see and talk to every one of our students. I felt this was the utmost concern as we move out of our buildings, that we're not seeing our kids on a daily basis. So we wanted to, after 2 weeks that we were down, our teachers came back on. Our teachers have reached out to every student and have talked to them one-on-one, and we want to see them. So even there's a few parents that do not want students participating in a Zoom with a bunch of classmates. Their concern is that because they can see a bunch of kids, that so can other people. So we've done one-on-one Zooms with those students just so that our teachers could see them. We have several students that we have not been able to contact. So SRO Angle has been making the rounds, going door to door, knocking on doors, talking with parents, and has informed those few haven't talked to that they need to contact their principal or SRO Angle. We'll be back to see them next week. This will be a continual effort that will not be forgotten. Those students are supposed to be online learning. If we don't see them within a 7-day period of time, Officer Engel will be going back out to see them. So the whole intent here is that we don't want to have our students get lost because we're not seeing them until August in person. So we're going to continue to push that. That's probably our first goal, is to see our students. Second goal is education, but the big concern right now with behavioral health, mental health concerns, especially with everyone being confined to their house, we want to make sure that our kids and families are okay and doing okay. We do have resources. Kelly Smith's been working, as well as I've been working with the Mental Health Association, that should we need them, we have resources available to help our families immediately. Senior year activities, year-end activities such as May Day prom, senior recognition night, baccalaureate, and commencement at this time, as you know, have been postponed, not canceled. There's been a few things on social media that they have been canceled. They have not been canceled. I met with 6 seniors today, the leadership of the senior class, to get their input. They are going to participate with our advisors in coming up with some, as I described it to them, out of the box thinking that May Day doesn't have to look like it's always looked. prom doesn't have to look like it's always looked, and either does commencement. So they're going to work with our advisors who've been working sort of behind the scenes. What we can tell you is that these activities will be planned without a date. The senior class, they're going to come back to us, or the seniors that are working with us are going to come back to us. We're going to meet with them next week again. What they're asking is, because of the amount of seniors that are working to try to gain savings for college, would like to schedule 2 dates. So, and please don't write this down, but sort of like a July 15th and an August 1st. But that way they could at least give their employer 2 dates for commencement. And if, with knowing that we may have to cancel the first one and the second one being as far out as we possibly could make it. They're also going to do a survey of the senior class, one of what are the activities that I just gave you, what are the most important to least important. Their concern is that they feel there's going to be a date of no return. As students start leaving for college, they're not going to be able to participate in commencement. So we and the administration has agreed that we will push that date as far as we can, and will hold commencement if at all possible. So they're very strongly for this, and they are really ready to participate and be part of the planning process. So I think it's a good thing. Since the governor announced last week the closing, the district has shifted very quickly to all kindergarten registration is completely online. We are researching at this point and think we will have it ready within the next 2 weeks, that we will be able to contact individual incoming students for assessments online, because we'd like to have some point of where they are today, giving parents some things to do over the summer months so that our kids come in strong in their kindergarten year. For the first time ever, high school course selection for next year is fully online as well. And we're going through class by class and talking with the students for their course selection for next year. We hope to have that done by the first week of May. Each principal has formed a parent group, and we'll be doing a first meeting with them sometime within the next 2 weeks. And their plan is to meet with their parent group on a bi-weekly basis from now through the end of the year to gain input on the online learning process, what's going on with students, with their children, and to improve our online learning. Tomorrow, PDE will be announcing the districts in the state that receive the equity grant, which we've applied for. Our process in the equity grant, and we've already reached out to about 9 other foundations. We have several students that do not have internet access. The Comcast does have the free internet access. We have Simon Foundation has agreed to put up money for the students that do not qualify for Comcast free access. The problem with that the administration feels is very short-sighted, because the Simon will pay for 4 months. Well, if we're going to do this, we'd like to do a long-term. If you have the devices, start using them at home, start using your computer, start using your Chromebook. So LOTC's began a process of developing a mesh internet throughout the borough. All we need is to put up antennas. So the first grant will get us started to put up antennas on our buildings, and it will eventually, we feel, with the grant process as well as the foundations that have already responded to us, within 6 months to a year, we should have the entire borough covered with the Columbia School District internet, which means if you have a computer of the school districts in hand, you will automatically get the internet in your home. It will also, which the concern today, if one of our kids has our device, but is on the free Comcast or the Comcast that Steinman pays for, it doesn't have our firewalls. So we don't have control of what students are using our devices for. And that's a concern of all parents as well as all educators. But the positive is that if we get this mesh internet in throughout the borough, the students can take the device home. They will always have the internet. It'll be the same as being on the internet in any of our buildings. So it's a positive. LOTC's been working on it. We feel, I've received several positive comments from different foundations in Lancaster County, as well as a couple national foundations. And we're sort of breaking it down into small chunks that they could each take a small chunk. And the total dollar cost of the internet for the entire borough is $400,000. So we're looking to be able to put that in. I'm hoping within 12 months, the responses we've gotten in the last week, we may be able to get it done in 6 months. We'll keep you informed on that. And then finally, PDE continues to work on concerns and issues for 1920 and 2021. With that being said, they've moved anything with a deadline of June 30th has been extended without a deadline extension. All they have said is anything that was deadline June 30th, it's extended. We don't know what that means. We're still waiting for the waiver forms, and we'll work with the board as we need waivers. That concludes my report, unless there's any questions, Mr. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Strickler. There's a lot of stuff to absorb there, but thank you for your all your data. Appreciate that. Going down the agenda, we have individual reports, and we can go through them. I'm not sure if the different groups that they'll be reporting on have met. Probably not in person, of course. Maybe they have met virtually, so we'll see. And first report we would look at would be Mrs. Young, IU report.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Unfortunately, Brian has not been able to do a virtual. We were having some problems, so we have not been able to meet as a board for the IU 13.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Young. I appreciate that. LCCTC report, Mrs. Duncan.
Yes, President Leader, we were able to meet last month via Zoom, and as of this week, the LCCTC has started planned instructions, and they're identifying students. They're having problems with connecting with some of their students. And so those who are still not connected, they have approximately 150 students who they have not yet connected with. So if they don't get in touch with them, they're working to have their faculty and administrators reach out to the students and families. And what they're doing is, for all the students who were not yet connected, they will put together learning packets and mail them out to them. They're working hard on trying to put a plan together and how we will adhere and get together for doing some graduation. They're trying to get guidance and recommendations from the other school districts. So that's the big problem they're working on, just as our school district is working on too. And our next virtual meeting will be Thursday, April the 23rd. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Mrs. Duncan. I appreciate that. Going down the list, PSBA, is there any report from them? I know they're pretty busy up there right now. Do we have any report from PSBA?
Mr. Leader, I just wanted to ask if, for the board members, are you receiving the daily update in your emails?
I am.
Okay, they're all board members. Just shake your head one way or the other, and I'm good. Okay, because we're getting Robert, you're not. Robert's not. Anyone else? Okay, I'll make sure, Robert, that you do it. I'll check on it as to why you're not. But we're getting, I'm assuming you're getting like 2 and 3 some days and 1 every day. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't want to forward another one to you each time if you're already getting it. That's really the updates. They're not sending anything specifically to us because they're busy sending the dailies to you.
Yes, thank you. It's a busy time for them, I'm sure. Going down the list would be Lancaster County Tax Collection Bureau. That'd be Mr. Ramsey.
Yes, thank you, President Leader. We did not meet this month. Our next meeting is June 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Appreciate that. Community Development, Mrs. Kaiser. Do you have anything to report?
Not really, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that street sweeping is happening, but they're not ticketing at this time.
Thank you for that public announcement, Mrs. Kaiser. We appreciate that. Education Foundation, I attend that meeting. That was canceled for the last month, so I don't have a report there. Unless Tom has something that I don't know about. Tom, do you have anything on from the Ed Foundation?
I have nothing for last month, but you'll be receiving an invitation to a Zoom meeting for Monday.
Okay, thank you. And the last individual report we have would be Land Bank, and that'd be Ms. Honnold.
And that also did not occur due to the pandemic, so that meeting did not happen publicly or at all.
Okay, Ms. Honnold, thank you. Now we're down to public comment on agenda and educational items. And I would have to ask Mr. Ramsey if anything has come in to him.
There have been no public comments, Mr. Leader, President Leader.
Either, you don't have to call me president, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. That's wonderful. Okay, we're going down for any dates for future meetings. There will be committee meetings May 5th. I believe that's Property and Finance. And Committee of the Whole meeting, followed by Extracurricular, followed by Curriculum Committee, followed by Policy on May 7. And our regular board meeting will be again 6 p.m. on May 21st, 2020. All the meetings, like we said previously, will be held virtually for the remainder of the school year due to the governor's order of closing schools for the remainder of the school term. Are there any other comments from any members of the board? If not, then this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your presence. We appreciate that.
Have a great night.